everybody. It's great to see you. So many familiar faces. And back at Hector's for our first issues breakfast for the 2011-2012 season. For people watching this at home, this is the first issues breakfast for the League of Women Voters of Larchmont and Mamaroneck. And we're here every month for special meetings. And today we are here to remember September 11th, 10 years ago. Before we introduce our speakers, I want to welcome us to the new season. We're going to have a very special season this year. We've got elections coming up in the village of Mamaroneck, in the town of Mamaroneck. In the spring, we've got elections coming in the village of Larchmont. We've got trustee elections, town supervisor, mayor, and county legislator. We will be hosting debates at the town center on October 26th. We hope people will come out for that. We're going to have a number of programs this fall. And what I'd like to just mention today, because we know it with certainty, is there are going to be two programs on the hydraulic fracturing upstate New York. We're teaming up with folks in Rye on September 20th, although we are not sponsoring this, but we are all invited to the Rye Free Reading Room at 1601 Boston Post Road, where they will be showing Gasland. And we will also have George Latimer there to answer questions and offer suggestions on advocacy. As you may know, there is an environmental impact review going on. The final report was just released. It will be coming through comment period ending December 12th. On Tuesday, October 4th, I will be hosting an event at the Mamaroneck Public Library. And I'm going to be talking about research I've been doing for the last 5 months. And this is news breaking. And I've been offered the cover of a magazine on this. This is a big story about fracking. And even though this is happening upstate, this impacts all of us. It impacts all of us as taxpayers. And it impacts the secondary mortgage market. And I won't say more, but I'd like to see you there. I really hope that we'll have a showing for this. It's quite important. September 11th. I think all of us remember this as a day, much as the loss of President Kennedy, much as Pearl Harbor for others. It is our legacy. And today we are here to honor those who died by honoring the spirit of our great country. 10 years have brought war, has brought an economic downturn, has brought a lot of difficulty for many people in this country, but this is a country with an incredible spirit. It's exemplified by what the League of Women Voters does. We educate people, we call you to action, and we're here today to reclaim the path to this country. We're going to listen to our speakers. I'm going to turn this over to Carolyn Pomerantz in a moment to introduce our speakers. And my hope for all of us is that when we leave today, we will continue by becoming involved in community, because that is what makes this country great. Thank you for coming. Carolyn.
I guess Beth had said about what I wanted to say, that, you know, here we are at the 10th anniversary of 9/11. We're hearing on the news terror threats once again. All of us are concerned that, you know, we have to be vigilant, ever vigilant, and it just brings this moment yet alive again for us. And I can only say that we each have our own personal memories of that day, and every memory that each of us has is special and unique, and personal. And we have 3 gentlemen here who are going to share their memories, both personal and professional, of what went on that day. There were a lot of things going on behind the scenes that some of you may or may not have been aware of, involving our law enforcement and our fire department and EMS. Some of that they'll be able to, shed some light on. But I think most importantly, it's how we did come together, all of us, to respond, to care about our neighbors, to care about the people in Manhattan, and to look out for each other. And it's a thing that we will always do as a community. Larchmont, Mamaroneck, town of Mamaroneck, we look out for each other. So without further ado, let me go to our first speaker, Lieutenant Michael Sindrich. He currently is with the town of Mamaroneck Police Department, and I'm just going to let you speak.
Okay, do you mind if I go to the end of the table there? I can
Well,
have
they'd like you to stay here, if
Okay,
that's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
I apologize if you don't
All
mind
right,
turning your head from time to time.
I'll just give you a brief overview of who I am. I'm Michael Sindrich. I'm a lieutenant with the town of Mamaroneck Police Department. I've spent 32 years in law enforcement, 27 years right here with the town of Mamaroneck. And I'm going to talk a little bit. For 4 years I was assigned to the Justice Department, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and I was working in Lower Manhattan for several years, and I had a close bond with a number of federal agents, FBI, DEA, and ATF agents. My role in the 9/11 tragedy was on the periphery. Like many of you here, I was in my kitchen on a bright Tuesday, a sunny day. I witnessed the event, the first event, where it was a little block on the TV screen that showed the plane, and there was a fire, and nobody knew what it was. The newscasters were kind of dismissing the whole incident as a small plane that hit the World Trade Center, an accident. And then it became more involved, and obviously when the second plane hit the North Tower, it became more of a call to action. We fully understood that, in my opinion, we were at war. I wasn't hesitating. I knew I would be called into work. I was getting my gear ready, and the phone rang, and the entire town of Mamaroneck Police Department was called in, to deal with this tragedy. Upon arriving at headquarters, it was the senior officers. We were strategizing on, first and foremost, how to defend our communities and how to react to this tragedy and take care of our residents who may have been working in the New York City area. And as I'm sure you're aware, New York City was locked down. If you were in Manhattan, you had to find a way home other than the train or the bus, because there were no ways in or out.
How are you going to talk now?
That's why. Believe me, I don't need it. After a short time later, closer to the evening hours, we had our plans formatted, and the New York City police officers, be it the Port Authority Police, NYPD, and through the Westchester County Department of Public Safety, had basically called for mutual aid. Now, to me, this was very disconcerting. Here we have, in my opinion, the strongest police department in the world, not New York State, not the United States, but in the world. 40,000 members strong, and they're calling for mutual aid. So this was very disconcerting to each and every one of us. And it was more disconcerting to me because in '93, when the first attack on the World Trade Center occurred, and it was in February, later on, a few months later, I had the opportunity to visit the Trade Center through my contemporaries in the federal agencies. And I'll be honest with you, when I saw the devastation of that building in '93, where 4 floors were blown out, where the bomb in the van had hit, and I wondered, aloud, I couldn't understand how that building didn't fall. And it goes to the unique engineering and construction. What more concerning to me was, in talking to ATF and the FBI and NYPD members, if that building had collapsed, there would have been 50,000 strong deaths. And I'm bringing that up now because what we were thinking in the early hours of 9/11 is that we were going to be witnessing a tragedy, a horrific tragedy of substantial death and destruction. And through the grace of God and through the efforts of the first responders and the individual civilian heroes in the building, under 3,000 people died in all of the three tragedies, and it was with the Pentagon, the Shanksville, and the Trade Center. So getting back to that day, we were all on edge, obviously, and you know, your training kicks in. I had served in the Marine Corps before becoming a police officer. I had witnessed, you know, some death and destruction, but nothing as horrific as what I witnessed at the World Trade Center. Our initial response was we sent a fresh team to New York City. They were assigned to for deployment at the Javits Center. They were deployed to different areas, and we continued to do that for a couple of days. And there came a point in time where the town of Mamaroneck police officers, as were other police officers in Westchester County, responded to assist New York City as volunteers. We went down there, and for me personally, it was a labor of love that New York City had helped us and so many times that I just felt they were both a professional and a moral obligation to respond to the needs of the NYPD. And like I said, I was out there. You know, I didn't work at the what they called the pile. Wasn't doing a rescue and recovery. I wasn't in the mix at the Trade Center, although I was there. My assignment early on was a security detail around the UN. And if you would think in 2001 that First Avenue would be blocked off for 7 blocks with barricades and garbage trucks loaded with sand, so there couldn't be another attack from the street, and then with police boats on the East River, and at night I remember looking to the sky, I'm saying to myself, how did this happen? And then you see a fighter jet flying at a low altitude down the East River. You knew this was an immense and enormous tragedy. So, you know, it kept me going for a while, and it was really psychologically a concern, and you know, you have to think of what action we take immediately, and who a community like the two Mamaronecks and Larchmont are dependent on. And you're dependent on the town police, the village police, the villages, the fire departments, and the volunteers. Nobody is coming to help you immediately. We've witnessed that in floods, we've witnessed it in tragedies, and in other tragedies, but I think, and I'm very proud to have worked here for so long, that our communities are well protected, and we're well trained, and we went through a bunch of, you know, other facets of training over the last 10 years in response to this new type of warfare. For me, you know, I knew people that died in the tragedy. One of my oldest son's classmate's father was there for the first time. He never lived to witness his son becoming a doctor. Things like that really stood out with me. But and my first grandchild was born 8 days after the World Trade Center tragedy. And I remember standing in the hospital right after she was born and looking at this little baby and saying, life goes on. And then after we left there, it was back to the grind, you know, going back, and I escorted numerous families and friends in funeral details at St. John and Paul's. It was very disconcerting, and it still is today. And when you hear, even today, when I see a plane flying low, even though I didn't witness the actual event in Manhattan, I can understand what the people were going through, and it's something that is really, really a tragedy. And we are somewhat prepared, but I think in combat, in law enforcement, and firefighting, you can't blink. You can't let your guard down. And I think the United States, with our CIA and other agencies, we did let our guard down a little to allow this to happen. And it's something that we have to be ever vigilant and continue to be vigilant, and vigilant, and ask our senior representatives in government to be vigilant to make sure that we gain the intelligence to prevent this type of an attack in the future. It's sad that, you know, we have this stigma that, you know, we are a very successful country. People don't like us, though. There are people that don't like our way of life, don't like us for whatever reason. It's not going to go away tomorrow. It may not go away for 100 years. So we have to do, maybe we have to act in a more congenial fashion, but it's something that, you know, America is what it is. And in closing, I'm just going to say what was even more impressive to me was the number of volunteers that came from other communities. I worked with New York City firemen that were obviously there and being, you know, paid to do what they had to do. But I met Chicago firemen and Los Angeles firemen that took vacation because their communities couldn't afford to send people out. They took vacation to respond and help their brother firefighters in New York City. So it's something that, and that goes for the police officers also in the town of Mamaroneck. We had police officers that were taking personal days to go down and help their brothers in New York. So that's my little story. It's not much, but again, I thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay, why don't we save the questions till the end? Thank you very much. You know, 10 years is a long time, and people have changed what they're doing, and you know, a lot of the people who were on the police force, the fire department, EMS 10 years ago are not today. And one of the ones who has transitioned, I guess, is our next speaker, Greg Sullivan. Gregory is a practicing attorney in the village of Mamaroneck right now, but 10 years ago, he was a sergeant in the New York City Police Department, so he was kind of right there. And he has a very moving story, which I thank you for coming to share with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I have to laugh when Carolyn approached me to do this. I balked at it because I've been asked to talk about what had happened that day, and I've always said no. And this is the first time I've actually said yes. I became a police officer. I graduated from Fordham University and I went into the police academy. At the time, my father was a retired policeman, and he retired and he went to Wall Street and he worked for Prudential Securities, and he became very successful. And when I retired, when I graduated from college, he was operating a trading desk, and he was responsible for hiring everybody that came into the company. And he hired all of my friends, and most of them were unemployable, so they were very lucky that he was there. But I could have very easily gotten a job there, but I always wanted to be a cop, and I think initially my father felt a little bad about that, but in the end I think he was proud of it. But my two brothers, Jerry and Patrick, went on to Wall Street. Jerry graduated from St. Joseph's University in Pennsylvania, and my brother Patrick graduated from Georgetown in 1991. And they both wound up on Wall Street. And the two of them wound up at Cantor Fitzgerald. And on September 1st, 2001, my brother Jerry left Cantor Fitzgerald. The North Tower, 104th floor was where his desk was. And Jerry would sit there, and my brother Patrick would sit there on a trading desk. So Jerry took a seat on the stock exchange, and he was working down there as a trader. Around that same time, I signed a contract to buy a house up here in Mamaroneck. My wife and I came up here to visit friends in Larchmont, and my friend's wife caught my wife's here, and we came up here looking for a house. We lived in an apartment in Brooklyn at the time. It was kind of like a lark to me because we didn't have the money to buy a house, let alone a house in a community like this. But we came up and looked through the summer of 2001, and we found a house on Stanley Avenue that was an interstate, and people hadn't lived there in a while, and it was the cheapest house in the best neighborhood. So we were lucky enough to sign a contract for that on September 6th. And the reason we were was because my brother Patrick gave me the money for down payment. And then when he gave me the check, it was right, the U.S. Open was starting that day, and Tropicana had a tennis court in the plaza, and they were playing tennis and giving out orange juice. And I was waiting for my brother to come, and he got off the bus in front of Century 21, came across the street with a big smile on his face. He gave me this check. I felt so bad. But he laughed. He goes, "You take this for your family?" Because I was in law school at the time. Anyway, September 11th happens, and I'm like, holy mackerel, I had the gift affidavit on my desk in my office that he was supposed to sign. So I was like, all right, this is my out. I can get out of this contract and get his money back. But my parents and my brother wouldn't let me, my other brother Jerry wouldn't let me do that. So that's an aside. We wound up buying the house, living happily ever after, I guess. But I was in my office. I worked at Lafayette Street. I was a sergeant in the legal bureau. I was in law school, and I was working with another sergeant, Billy Miller. And we had both worked in Brooklyn for many years before getting transferred over there. And we fancied ourselves street cops, now working behind the desk, and we used to joke about it. But we had a couple of officers on our team were at the World Trade Center when the first plane hit. And they called the officer and said, a commercial airliner just flew into the World Trade Center. So I looked out my window. I couldn't see the buildings. We were one block north of the Tweed Courthouse, like between the Tweed Courthouse and 26 Federal Plaza. And I was on the 5th floor. I could see the smoke and the paper and everything coming out. So we went down to Chambers Street and we were looking. And when we got down there, the fire trucks were coming over the Brooklyn Bridge. And I'll never forget one of the ladder trucks that every man on that truck, I found out later, was killed, was coming around. If you come off the Brooklyn Bridge to go to Chambers Street, you kind of bear to the right off the bridge and then you make the left at Chambers Street. I remember one of the firemen kind of hopping himself out of the cab to look at what was going on, just because the sight was unbelievable. And the reports were a small plane crashed into the building. When I went through my training in emergency service, we had done plane crash mock-ups and stuff like that, and watched all kinds of video and the plane crash at LaGuardia in I think 92 or 93 when the plane went off the runway. And I don't know if it was the training or what, but you could look and see that was just the smoke coming out of there and the paper, and you could tell it was several floors were just opened up, that it was bad. And I had a cell phone at the time, which not everybody had. I mean, think back about communications and how things work today. I had a cell phone, so I called my brother and nobody answered. I called him at his desk, then I called him at his on his cell phone. He had a cell phone, and I didn't get him. Then my father called me. My father and mother lived in Rockaway Point in Queens, and my father had talked to my brother about 20 minutes before that. He called him every morning, and my father I was hoping that like my brother went out for Monday Night Football and got all banged up and got to work late, but he loved what he did, and he was in work at his desk for the daily call with my father. My father said, "Yeah, Patrick's there." And he didn't know where Jerry was, because Jerry was in the stock exchange, and they locked everybody in there. They wouldn't let anybody out. So my father was watching from his back deck with binoculars the buildings, and he actually saw the second plane hit. So I was in communication with my father, and I couldn't get in touch with my brother, and I never did. But my instinct was to go over there, and my partner Billy, he's like, you know what? There were literally hundreds of cops there. He goes, we don't have uniforms on. We're only going to get in the way. People are going to have to stop us and tell us to move, and we're going to have to explain who we are. So we went back to the office and put our uniforms on. And at that point, we went downstairs, and I was an EMT, and they set up like a triage because people were starting to walk north. If they didn't go over the Brooklyn Bridge, they were coming up Center Street and Lafayette Street, so they were kind of coming right to us. So we were asked to stay there, and I didn't, it was so weird because I didn't know what to do. I knew my brother was in the building, and I didn't know. So I called his cell phone again. I just said, listen, go down, don't go up. Because you could see with the smoke going the way it was just like a chimney, there was no way anybody was above that. It's going to last too long with all the smoke in the building. and you could tell there was no water because it was all black smoke. Not that I'm a fireman, but there was absolutely no water up there. And having been in the emergency service unit, we would train to rappel out of helicopters. In fact, the first World Trade Center bombing, the squad that I was in was the unit that actually went onto the roof. And I knew the helicopters that carried them and that rappelled, and those helicopters were off to the side. They made no attempt to try to put anybody on the roof. So I knew there was going to be no help on the roof. So I made my way back down towards the Trade Center when the first building fell. And everybody remembers what a clear, beautiful day it was. And it was an eerie thing because all of a sudden it just became totally dark and quiet, like eerily quiet. I was on Fulton and Broadway, I guess, at that point. But, you know, 2 blocks away, like, I guess almost like out of the smoke, you could still hear the yelling and screaming and the bodies hitting the ground. And I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever heard a body hit the ground, but when you're going 32 feet per second for a quarter mile and you stop, it's pretty loud, and people were watching this. And one of the issues I always had was, in historical context, you talk about Pearl Harbor. People grew up learning about that, watching the video, watching the planes, and the ships on fire. September 11th was kind of sanitized. Like, well, we don't want to offend anybody's sensibilities, you know? And I laugh because we never recovered my brother's body, and we don't know if he died when the building went down, or he made the choice that a lot of people made, either to be incinerated or to jump a quarter mile to their death. And a lot of people aren't exposed to that and don't know that that was going on. Hundreds of people were coming out of those buildings, and that was the only choice they felt they had. You know, they weren't wearing military outfits, they weren't armed, they were just, you know, look at all those poor slobs that were up in the windows on the world. You know, people going there for a breakfast, first time ever in the building. They weren't at war with anybody. They were living life the way they were supposed to be living. And one of the things I feel bad about is that it's people's sensibilities aren't offended. I think this country's sensibility should be offended because the people that did this to us have been fighting this war for hundreds, if not thousands of years. You open up the Old Testament, this fight that these people are fighting was going on back then in the same region of the world. So, not that I want to get political, but that just, these people are very patient. Americans, like I talked about having a cell phone back then, that was something not everybody had. Now, you know, you go into a restaurant in Manhattan, people are taking orders on an iPad that goes right to the cook, you know. It's the technology and the impatience of people. Like my kids, if they're not being stimulated in some form or fashion when they're awake for less than 5 minutes, they're going bananas saying, I'm bored, I need something to do. The people that we're at war against are very patient people. And 10 years later, we're still trying to figure out who we're fighting, in my opinion. And they're out there, and I think we need to be vigilant and need to you know, stay on course with making sure that we're safe, that people can walk into a building on a Tuesday morning and not have to worry about getting blown up or whatever. But I digress. After the first tower came down, where I was standing, I couldn't see anything. So I walked back towards where my building was, and that's when like the Dawn of the Dead appeared. The people were literally coming out of clouds, you know. You can see between the tears and just like wet streaks down this caked on white powder. The powder at some points was higher than ankle deep. There were people's shoes in the street. I mean, literally, just the stuff that was coming down. Paper, you know, tons and tons of paper. You know, you can pick it up and read stuff, you know. There's stories about people living on the promenade in Brooklyn that had, you know, paper landed on their thing. It was just tremendous, the scope, and really hard to comprehend at that point, you know. So the day went, we stood there, all the coffee carts, you know, were abandoned down there. So we were taking the water off the coffee carts and just, you know, wiping people's eyes and doing whatever we could a little bit, and just telling everybody to go. If you didn't go over the Brooklyn Bridge, you came to us, and we just told them they had to keep going north till they could figure out how to get home. It was amazing how quickly Lower Manhattan was shut down. I mean, the streets were, you know, there were no vehicles. It cleared out really quick. So I went home that night at some point, and I don't remember how I got home, but I went home. I must have drove, but I got home. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I put on the TV, and you talk about how many people were in that building. They were like the news and were just putting up numbers that were astronomical. I mean, like 10,000 people, and listed them by nationality, by corporation. It was just amazing. And thank goodness that number was considerably less when everything was said and done. But I remember trying to lay down, and I'm laying. I laid down in the bed, and I got up. I was, what the hell am I doing? You know, my brother's over there somewhere, and I just didn't know what to do. It was literally walking in circles. So the next morning, I went back to work, and I had spoken to my father, and I told my father that if he didn't walk out of the building, then it was gone. I never thought, from when I looked at that building and he didn't answer the phone, my gut was that he was gone. You know, he wasn't going to get out of there. But when I went to work, my father asked me to check the hospitals in the city for him. So again, my partner Billy Miller, he did everything for me. He went to the we worked for an assistant commissioner, and he went to him and said, listen, I'm going to take Greg around to the hospitals, and then we'll come back and do whatever you want us to do. So I remember getting in a police car, and we went to Beekman Hospital, which is the closest hospital to the World Trade Center. And they had the police had put detectives at every hospital to deal with people coming in looking for loved ones and everything like that. I remember walking in, and I'd never seen Beekman Hospital's emergency room so empty. And I knew the detective in there, and I walked in. His last name was Quinn. And he goes, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, you know, I'm looking to see if my brother's here." And I had also my first cousin Peter Milano worked with my brother. He perished also. I'm looking for Patrick Sullivan and Peter Milano. And he goes, "We have nobody here. There was not one person brought from the World Trade Center site to Beekman Downtown Hospital." And it was weird because there was nurses and doctors. So we were going to go up to Bellevue next, and there was a doctor standing there, and he said, "Can I jump a ride with you?" Because he had come down from, they sent an army of doctors and nurses down there, and they were all kind of standing around, and he wanted to go back to Bellevue, so we were driving him back. So we said, "Hey Doc, what's going? You know, was it busy last night?" He goes, "Nothing. Nothing. Nobody. Bellevue was the same." We went all the way up to 168th Street, Columbia. A couple people here, a couple people there, but it didn't even take. It took us maybe an hour and a half to circle Manhattan because there was no casualties. Either you walked out of the building and you were dead. And I thought that was amazing because the lines to donate blood were unbelievable. People were just dying to do stuff. It was something. It was really amazing. And for weeks after that. So, and then we went to my parents' house. I forget what day this was, but a day or two after, and the stream of people coming into my parents. And to touch on what you say, people wanted to do something and volunteer. For months after that, people would leave stuff for my parents, dinner. You know, it was just the two of them. And ring the bell, and my mother would open the door and it'd be dinner. It just went on and on. And it was nice, the support that they got. And then after that, my mother had a real tough time. And it's weird, I guess, so unnatural to lose a child. And it's weird because, like, you go out and you have a few drinks and you wrap yourself around a telephone pole, and the death is horrible. You see it every once in a while with the teenagers, or somebody meets an unfortunate death. You have a body, you dispose of it according to your beliefs, and you move on. And it's really weird not having that opportunity. That it's kind of open-ended. And I remember my mother had a lock of my brother's hair from his first haircuts, and that's what we buried. But it's just open-ended, and then because this has gone on for so long, it's always in the news. There's always something coming up, you know, and it just keeps coming back. And you know, people say, "Why don't you just move on?" And you move on, absolutely. But because it wasn't tied up in a nice, neat package, it's a weird feeling, you know. And I feel funny even getting emotional sometimes because I know that's the way people think. I would think the same thing. So anyway, the nice thing about my parents was they wanted to give back to their community. They have a volunteer fire department in Rockaway where they live. So my mother became an EMT, and my father became the ambulance driver. So to this day, they drive the ambulance and help people. So it's good. And that's my story. I appreciate the opportunity. And I know it was a little disjointed. I didn't write anything down. I was just kind of winging it, but thank you.
Sorry for your loss.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for honoring Patrick Sullivan's memory in such a meaningful way, and we'll think of him in our prayers. If I can go on here. Our last speaker today, and there are many, like I said, many stories, and we're just touching on a few. You can multiply this by the people who are keeping their thoughts to themselves and keeping their memories to themselves, but know that there are many people out there who are experiencing pain this weekend, I'm sure, at this 10th anniversary, the pain of loss, and thank you, Greg, for sharing it. And yet again, we have one more story. Captain and Acting Chief John Caparelli is from the Larchmont Fire Department, and he'll share his story of that day.
Good morning. I'll just give you a little background on myself. I'm with the Larchmont Fire Department for 22 years now. I'm the captain of the department, as Carolyn said, and I lost my cousin Joseph Miscali from Rescue 5 in Staten Island on September 11th. That day, as everybody else said, was a beautiful day, and we were at the firehouse as normal, having breakfast, watching the news, reading the paper, and then we saw the reports. The plane hit the World Trade Center, and everybody started gathering around the TV. The guys from the night tour were waking up, and they got around the television. Guys that were coming on duty were there, and then after the second plane hit, we knew that it was a big issue. It was a big problem, and right about that time, as these gentlemen said, New York City started calling for mutual aid. They started calling for assistance because all the all the trucks from New York City, from the North Bronx and Brooklyn, Staten Island, Queens, were converging on Manhattan. To them, I guess it was a huge fire. It was a huge rescue operation. And in the fire service, Greg, right?
Yes.
Okay, as Greg said, the guys were hanging out of the fire truck looking at the fire. They were looking at that fire and they were saying, "This is going to be great. You know, this is what my job is. I'm going to start helping people. There's a huge fire. This is what I do. This is my training. I get to use my training. I get to use my equipment." And they were looking forward, in a way, to going and operating at that incident. They didn't know what it was going to turn out to be. You know, nobody does. But we were looking at the television and we saw that, and I'm sure that was going through everybody's mind, like, "Oh my God, these guys are going to be in for a mess." But Washington County DES was calling for mutual aid companies to respond to the Bronx. Larchmont gathered 4 guys on an engine and 4 guys on the tower ladder, and Little Larchmont too, with 15 career guys, grabbed as many guys as we could, and we went to 233rd Street in the Bronx. And as soon as we got there was Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, a bunch of other companies there. We're just waiting on 233rd Street for direction. And very surprisingly again, they picked Larchmont's engine, which I was on, to go to engine 90 on White Plains Road further down in the Bronx to man that firehouse. So for the first 24 hours, I was at engine 90 in the Bronx with my guys and a few New York City guys and a lieutenant. And all the meantime, all that while, I was calling my cousin Joey on his cell phone. And as Greg said, the communications were poor. So I got his voicemail. I got his answering machine at his house. And I kept saying, "Joey, call me, let me know you're all right. Call me, are you working? Just let me know." And I kept calling and got no answer. I find out that he worked the night tour at Rescue 5 in Staten Island the night before September 11th, was making French toast for the firefighters at the firehouse with his youngest daughter there, Katie. And the call came in to go to Manhattan for the Trade Center, and he had somebody else take his daughter home, and he was off duty, but he jumped on the truck. And I think you said you saw a ladder truck coming over the Brooklyn Bridge. He was on ladder 122 from Staten Island with Rescue 5, responding to Rescue 5. Very possibly could have been those guys. But anyway, I kept calling them, trying to get them. I couldn't get them. So we ended up at Engine 90 for 24 hours. After that, I was relieved by another group of Larchmont firefighters, and I think another engine came from another department up a little further in Westchester. And I went back to the firehouse, and they were organizing another group of guys to go back right down to the trade center and start working at the trade center. So I jumped on that assignment, and we went back again. I was there for another, I think, 12 hours that night. And I think it had started raining the second night. September 12th, I think it was raining and windy, and we were working on the pile, and it was unbelievable. It was 10-story pile of dust and steel, and there was no computer screens, there was no desks, there was no chairs. All there was a mess of concrete dust and debris. And we were there with buckets the first couple of nights. Just filling a bucket and passing it down the line. Filling a bucket, passing it down the line. And that was going on and on and on. While they were fighting fires, you know, the New York City guys were fighting the fires. Heavy equipment was trying to move the steel. And I felt so minuscule filling a bucket up with this 10-story pile of debris, and I'm sending it down the line. I felt like I wasn't even helping. I'm sure a lot of guys felt that way, but that's what we did. That's what they organized. What I remember from the pile the first couple of nights was there were times in the beginning when they thought they were going to rescue people, save some lives, and they had dogs there. They had guys with cameras sticking it in the pile, robots going down in the pile, and every time they got any kind of inkling that they were going to, they heard something, they started screaming, "Quiet, quiet, everybody shut up." And hundreds or thousands of workers, heavy machinery, there wasn't a peep. Everybody just shut up, and there wasn't a sound until those guys that were listening were able to say, "No, go ahead, there's nothing, keep going." But it happened over and over again. Everybody would yell, "Quiet," and everything would shut down, and it was unbelievable how everybody could be so quiet. Also from the pile, there were gentlemen in camouflage standing on top of the pile while we were working at the bottom, and they had a little, they must have had a GPS unit in their hands, and they were categorizing every time somebody said they found something, an item of clothing, a person, an identification. We found a lot of photos. I found an ID card from a stewardess. But anytime somebody found something, those gentlemen in camouflage were, categorizing where you found it. They were putting it in a log, and that stuck in my mind. And that night that it was raining and windy, we were there. I guess they started setting up little kiosks. McDonald's was there. Uncle Ben's was there serving food. But there was another one of girls from NYU that were washing your eyes out. If you got dust in your eyes or debris in your eyes, you'd get online and go to their little station, and you're sitting in like a little chiropractor's chair maybe with your head back, and they would wash your eyes out, and they were so nice. They were like angels, those girls. It was unbelievable. But the food, I mentioned Uncle Ben's. After the first 12 hours or so, we were working there, and we got a break. We got to eat something. We went over to the Uncle Ben's little stand, and we got our plate of rice and chicken and beans, whatever they were handing out. And we left Uncle Ben's, turned around, and the wind came and blew dust all over our food. And my friend Steve, who worked with Steve Forrest, we looked at each other like, "I'm eating this anyway. This is the first hot meal I had in 12 hours. I'm eating it." And that's what we did. We sat there in the dust in the pile and covered in everything. I sat on in the Trade Center building itself. I don't know which building it was. We ate our meals sometimes in a furniture store that was, abandoned or closed, whatever. But in the store were couches, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 couches that they were selling, and we're sitting there covered in dust, eating our food on the furniture. Those are the memories I got from that. But anyway, after that day, I went back home for the first time in 3 days, and I haven't seen my wife or the kids for a couple of days. And my youngest daughter, she was a stutterer. And she stopped stuttering. We got it corrected, but after I had left, she started stuttering again. She was so upset, excuse me, she was so upset that I was gone You know, they didn't know, because my wife had pulled all the kids out of school on September 11th, and I didn't know that either. They went, when it happened, everybody went to the schools and got all the kids out. So when I got home, she was stuttering again, and you know, it was because she didn't know, she missed me. She didn't know, she understood what was going on. She was 8 at the time, 8, and she knew what was going on. You know, she knew where I was. I wasn't home for 3 days, and my wife was upset, but since then she corrected herself. But anyway, that really bothered me. But I left out a point that when I left the engine 90 and I went back to the firehouse, in the interim before I went back down to the Trade Center, I had gone to Staten Island to my cousin Joey's family with everybody. I met them all out there, and they were all. It was like a wake. You know, nobody was talking. No, they were asking questions. They they were asking me questions because I was a fireman. There was nobody else that was a fireman in the family, so they were asking me, where's Joey? Where could he be? And I had no answers. So his brother, who's my age, John, I was named after them, John and Joe, but his brother wanted to go back to the Trade Center. So we go to the Staten Island ferry port in Staten Island, and we try and get on the ferry. They let me on because I was in my fire department gear. They wouldn't let him on. He was a civilian. Everybody else was coming off the island. The only people going on the island were rescue workers, firemen, police, whatever. They wouldn't let him on. So I gave him my coat and helmet, and I had my pants on and my fire department shirt, and I snuck him on there, and I got him down there. So I worked the first few hours I was down there with him doing the same thing. We just got on the line and started working the bucket brigade, but we took a break from that, and we found his fire truck that was in the debris, and it was smashed, totally smashed. We found his coat, his jacket. We found his helmet. His son has his helmet now. We found his helmet. And that really upset John. You know, we surmised that he was outside his fire truck when the buildings came down, because he wasn't dressed. His coat was there, his helmet was there. You wouldn't leave that if you were going in the building. So we surmised that he was by the fire truck when the buildings came down, and you know, that was it. But anyway, all right. So I'm back home. I go back to I'm home, just like these gentlemen said. I couldn't stay home. I had to go back. I just was walking around. I was crying. I just couldn't stay home. I got my own car. I went back down to the Trade Center, and I got in. I just walked right in. I was there on my own for a few days, maybe 3 days, on and off, 12 hours at a time, working the bucket brigades. I hooked up with Joey's engine company, Rescue 5, and some guys from Yonkers, and we were just doing our normal thing, bucket brigade, doing what we had to do. And that lasted about 3 days, 3 or 4 days, on and off, 12 hours here, 12 hours there, until Westchester County organized a joint task force with all the Westchester County firefighters by bus to go down there and you know, have an organized response. So I came back home one day, went right back on the bus, and we stayed down there for probably another 24 hours, doing the same thing. After that, the FDNY shut down the site because there was some unscrupulous people, I guess, going into the site. You know, there was no accountability at that time, the first few days. So FDNY shut this site down, or maybe the police did, I don't know. But we weren't allowed to go back. We even organized another bus trip down there. They wouldn't let us in. Even with the FEMA and the OEM, Office of Emergency Management, access tags, you weren't FDNY, you weren't getting in. So that was the end for us. After that, we just waited. You know, the family just waited for news about Joey. And we had a memorial service on October 11th, a month later, without a body. The guys from my firehouse and all the firehouses around here went to numerous funerals, on and off, or numerous memorial services during those months, the next few months. And then on May 11th, my birthday, they found Joey. Yeah, oh yeah. And they buried him next to his father, his uncle, his grandparents, and his great-grandparents in Staten Island. And they buried him, I think, in August. I think they buried him in August because they had to go through the DNA testing and all that other stuff. By the time they got around to it, there was a ceremony, a burial in August for Joey. And that's it. That's what I got to tell you.
Thank you, sir. Oh my gosh. Do we have time for questions if you want, or? Yeah, okay. We're going to entertain any questions that anyone has from the audience, but before we do, I just want to say that I am so moved and thank you for sharing your stories, and we'll think of Patrick and Joey and all the many lives that were lost on 9/11.
Can we have a round of applause?
Yeah, oh yes, yeah, please. Are there any questions? If there's any questions, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if you can answer this, but there's reports last night and this morning of possible something happening on Sunday. Do you have anything that you can contribute to that?
Well, I know about a little bit more than you know, but the New York City Police Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and other overseas intelligence is investigating the threats. They aren't confirmed, but I think it's putting the country on alert. As was said, that, and I said, we have people that don't like us, and we have to remain ever vigilant. As an aside, in Greg's situation, and the reason I remember this, if you know the village phone number, 777-1122, there were 1,122 people that were never found in the World Trade Center tragedy. And it's a number that sticks in my heart because whatever it is, there's no closure. There's no closure for those families, and that's why I'm real proud of the people that put on the people that invested a lot of money, and money's always the topic, but they opted not to build on that final resting place of all those victims. So it's something that the mayor of New York City and all the developers have to be very proud of too.
I want to ask you if you have suffered any health effects from your activity there.
Yeah, I didn't mention that to you. I didn't want to make a big deal out of that. 2 weeks after I came back from working at the pile, my hands and feet started swelling up. The bottoms of my feet and the tops of my hands would start to swell up. And that was the beginning of it. And it's still happening now, except it's worse. Sometimes my tongue would swell up, my lips. I'll get hives for no reason, just huge hives on me, itchy hives. But they diagnosed it as unrelated to World Trade Center. I have to take steroids whenever it happens, and it's just ongoing. That hasn't gone away.
Respiratory?
No respiratory, no. I must have gotten into something, when I was digging around, and they think it might have altered my immune system a little bit, where now I'm allergic to something I was never allergic to before, and I don't know it, but they haven't found anything.
What kind of masks? We all hear about and see some of the pictures of people down on the piles working with masks. When did anyone get the alert that they had to be careful? Because clearly there are issues that remain and not enough was done and the wrong statements were made about the safety issues. You didn't have enough protection. Did any of you did anybody alert you right away about that?
I remember a couple of days after who was in charge of the EPA? It was the former governor of New Jersey. She declared the air was safe. In the beginning there, it was up to the individual really. They weren't forcing anybody to put anything on. In fact, if you look at the bucket brigades, there's dozens and dozens of guys not wearing anything. No. And I remember the second or third day, I was down at the pile, and I was over by the west side, on the West Side Highway where the American Express building was, and that was where the morgue was set up. And I remember passing what they were doing. That they found remains, they were putting them in black garbage bags and then bringing them in and tagging them and then moving them uptown eventually. But I remember guys coming out of there, and they weren't wearing anything. I never put anything on. I don't think I was ever close enough to anything after the first day, but there was a lot of guys that didn't wear anything, and they were relying on what they were told. And again, everybody's adrenaline was going. They wanted to help. They wanted to do something, and because nobody was finding anybody, it just made it that more. They wanted to get in there. Everybody wanted to be the person to find somebody, and it didn't happen.
The idea was to recognize that this stays with us And I'm very grateful for you for sharing the information. This isn't something we have to get over, as far as I'm concerned. This is something that we have to remember. This isn't something we put on the shelf. This is something that we have to remember as a legacy so that we don't deny it, but that we face it. It's part of the American fabric now, and we become strong when we recognize that there is human frailty among us. We join hands, we put our arms on each other. I'm a mother, I can understand a child stuttering. This is her love for you. This is what we do as people, and we reach out. This is something that we do on a community basis. I think maybe Judy can help talk about what we're doing today at County Center. And the only thing that I would say is, it isn't an event. It's life, and what we need to do is remember every day of our lives that we're a community, and we're here for each other all the time. Whether it's upstate, whether it's overseas, we're here. We are a world community now. And we're very grateful to you for humanizing something, because in some sense we're lucky that we weren't there. But on the other hand, we don't have the benefit of understanding the depth of the pain. And unless we do, we can't take steps forward. So I thank you on our behalf, and I'd like Judy to maybe mention for us.
Yeah, there is today, if you're available or if you can make some time to go over to the county center. It's a partnership between the county and the volunteer center, which is a part of the United Way, to host tables for many, many not-for-profits all over the county. And basically it's a celebration of volunteerism, and it's a way to get people aware of all of the volunteer abilities, all of the volunteer opportunities that are around the county. And as Elizabeth said, it's an attempt not to make September 11th just a Memorial Day, but more of a day of action, a day of coming together and taking this forward because of the efforts of people like you. I remember on that morning we had a summit meeting.
Yes, coming out of the diner in
We
Mamaroneck.
came out of the diner, and I drove to the town center to the office there. I was on the town board, and Michael Liverzani came whipping up in his fly car. And I said, "What's up?" He said, "Something terrible has happened. We need to go get provisions, and we're supposed to all meet up, all of the emergency personnel. The county is called to this area to meet at Playland parking lot, and we're going to be going into the city." And it was just this amazing rush of volunteers, really. It was volunteer work. And
Judy, will this be are people signing up today for something going forward?
They can get brochures, it's an awareness building, it's an opportunity to know that there is so much out there that we can all, you hear people say all the time, "Oh, I'd love to do something, I just don't know what, or I don't know where I can go, I don't know who I can sign up with." Well, this is an opportunity to find out.
Each person can find
And bring a
something
canned good. If you bring a canned good, you get checked off as a volunteer.
My daughter's Girl Scout troop's going. She brought her canned goods to school today with her.
Somebody said to me, "Oh, good, this is an opportunity to get anything out of your pantry that you really don't want, like your peas."
Now, we're going to have Mamaroneck shares tonight. Peggy Jackson, who's on our board, is one of the coordinators of that. And this is the fourth of those 4 events. So for people who don't know, even contributing a little bit of money, people are going out and supporting the restaurants. But it would be wonderful if somebody could take $10 or $20 and put it in those jars. They are supporting, I think there's cancer and does anyone know what the 4 events are? I'm not sure that I know of.
At home sound.
Okay.
Pediatric cancer,
Pediatric cancer, yeah.
EMS,
Okay.
EMS.
All right, so we're going to see you all there later. And Sue's going to be at the voter registration table, so say hello to her. We are, if anybody, by the way, since we're League of Women Voters, we are going to be registering people to vote if anybody needs that information. We have that information here right now. And
Elizabeth, is there an envelope around?
I believe that we even have absentee, I think I even have absentee ballots with me right now. And I just want to mention again that there is not there's going to be a dedication to the Mamaroneck Public Library next Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. This is a happy event.
Yes, happy.
Happy. It's a beautiful building. It was designed by a Mamaroneck resident. I worked as a lawyer on the architect's agreement, which I'm happy about. It is a beautiful addition. What I love about the building is that we took a piece of history and we've added on in such a respectful way. I hope that that's what we can do, take a piece of history, add on in a respectful way. Have a wonderful year. We're going to be sending out membership letters. We want people to join us. There's so much that we can be doing. I'm very pleased that the new principal of the high school is welcoming us into the high school to be gearing up with the students for the 2012 election. They really want us in there to help teach our children how to be good civic citizens. What could be better? So we're not going to be having our Friday Issues Breakfast next month, but we will be meeting again, as I said, at Mamaroneck Public Library at 7 o'clock on October 4th, where I will talk to you about some important information regarding hydraulic fracturing, and it impacts all of us. I want to thank our speakers again. I wish you only the best with your families. And
Elizabeth, could you just mention the 350th town anniversary?
happily, why don't you mention the 350th?
One of the coordinators of the 350th celebration was Nancy Seligson, who left a few minutes ago.
She has a meeting on
Oh, she has a meeting on it this morning. Okay. Anyway, it's the weekend, September 16th through the 18th. There are many activities planned. There's parades. There's picnic party. More information can be found on the Town of Mamaroneck website. That's townofmamaroneck.org. The parade is Sunday at 2 o'clock, beginning at Central School, and it goes up to Memorial Park. And there's a lot of free stuff. There's T-shirts. There are banners up. It's a big celebration. Everyone's welcome, and look for more information on it. Thank you.
Yes, Mary Lee.
What is being done for our immediate flood problem needs? I haven't heard. I feel very badly. I should have heard, I'm sure. Does anybody have any answer to what, in terms of volunteer needs, what's happening with those that have had flood trouble
My
again?
best recommendation would be to call the mayor's office.
I believe it's being run right now. A lot of the work would have been going on through the, Hispanic Resource Center in the village, but they flooded.
They're
So-
in Washingtonville.
So Washingtonville Housing Alliance, get in
Washingtonville
touch, go
Housing,
there
yes.
and see, because, and there's also FEMA has opened up in White Plains.
Jeremy Ingpen may be able to help
Jeremy
as well.
Ingpen.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
so if you go to Washingtonville Housing.
Habitat for
I
Humanity.
spoke with the mayor yesterday about this.
Yes.
If you go to Washingtonville Housing Alliance, that is where the Hispanic Resource Center is now also,
Yeah.
and the efforts are being coordinated through there. So,
Very good. We'll report that at our summit meeting a week from.
Right.
Elizabeth, could I ask our first responders a question? Are these ceremonies each year helpful? And don't answer so quick, because some of the conversations we've had is that people would just assume not make as big an issue of it every year. I mean, we gather a lot of resources, we do a lot of digging up of people's emotions and stuff, and yes, on some level it's helpful, but could we let it rest for a little while and then do maybe a 5-year anniversary or a 20-year anniversary? Do we need it every year?
Well, my brother Jerry is reading names this year, and someone put his name into the lottery, and he was very excited about it, and I'm happy for him. I think that's gonna take care of itself over time. You'd think, like, I was listening to Pete Hamill on the radio when I parked over here, and he was talking about it, and he was in historical context. This is going to be like our kids' Pearl Harbor, like my parents growing up with that as kids, and the soldiers on Rockaway Beach, the silos in Fort Tilden, right in Queens. So I don't, Pearl Harbor was more national in scope because everybody in every neighborhood had somebody in the Army or the Navy, in the military, and was affected in some form or fashion. So this was very concentrated in the Northeast and you know, on the eastern seaboard. So people on the west coast aren't as directly affected as we are. I think it's going to take. I think it'll run its course. My personal feeling is I don't think we should forget, and I think it should be. People should understand what we're up against, but I would. Taking how you seem to be going with your question, I would seem to agree with you, like the pomp and circumstance of the day. I don't, you know, but I think time will play that out. Yeah, but I think that's a great question.
I agree with Elizabeth, though, if we let this go, all the people that died will have died in vain. The 5,000 or more people that have died in Iraq and Afghanistan in wars since 9/11, the over 50,000 injured, they sacrificed for the country, whether you agree with the war or you don't agree with the war, they were serving their country, doing the will of the people. And if we let this go, they would have died in vain. And the personal tragedies, there are people that are reluctant to talk about it, and a number of them, I think, would as soon let it go. But we as a country have to, again, remain ever vigilant, and I firmly believe we let our guard down after the '93 terrorist attack. And I think, I don't know if this could have been prevented, but I think we let our guard down, we blinked, and you blink in combat, you lose. And so that's my feeling, my personal feelings anyway.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. We're going to end now.
Thank you.